manager out here in the Willamette Valley for our estate wineries. And we have this huge, exciting cross-departmental kind of push going on now with Oregon Chardonnay. JFW is so well positioned to be the ultimate kind of leader as we build this category. And so really excited to have this chance today to talk to you guys about Oregon Chard and kind of transport you out here to the Valley. We have the friendly, lovely faces of Thomas and Molly that you know quite well by now. And we have Miss Eugenia Keegan, who earlier I called the Queen of Oregon, and I will maintain that title for her. She is the ultimate knowledge keeper out here and kind of enables our team to do what we do. But we've been working, as I said, across all departments. Big shout out to Gil, who's been helping so much with this as well. And coming in January will be a big push for a new campaign we're launching. So to tee that up, the goal of today is really to start introducing some vocabulary and some, bring everyone into the fold on Oregon Chardonnay. And we thought a fun way to do that, instead of some slides, though there is a PowerPoint deck that I just loaded into the chat, so you guys can all open that up. But we thought it'd be fun. One of my favorite things is to just watch these talented people taste and talk about what's in their glasses. So today they're going to kind of take a trip around the world, and there will be a Chardonnay from Burgundy, from North Coast California, and from South Africa. And we've been playing a little game where, as they taste through, chime in the chat box, let us know what region you think we're in, and we'll have some Oregon Chardonnay prizes for people that are guessing early and correctly. So before we head into our tasting, Eugenia, I thought you did such a great job earlier this morning, just kind of teeing up the history, especially of Oregon Chardonnay, because it's so important to answer the question of, why Oregon Chardonnay now, and maybe not earlier, as you mentioned before.
Thanks, Rachel, and good morning or early afternoon to all of you out there in Zoom land. So the focus today is Oregon Chardonnay, but we wanted to put it into the context of Chardonnay around the world, because clearly you have a lot of knowledge about Chardonnay. And I think the reason that the history of Oregon Chardonnay is sort of interesting, because there's this big buzz about Oregon Chard right now, Willamette Valley Chardonnay. And as Rachel said, I asked the question earlier, why now and why not earlier? Because when the first pioneers arrived in Oregon in the 60s, they brought their best guess at cool climate winemaking, and they planted in pretty much equal thirds Riesling, Chardonnay, and Pinot Noir. Pretty hard to understand. Virtually no Pinot Gris. And we know what's happened with Pinot Noir. It went from 35% of the acreage to 70%. And mind you, the acreage has grown a ton in there at the same time. Riesling has sadly gone the way of New World Riesling, and there's not a lot of market for it. But obviously we know Chardonnay is a absolutely critical variety and sells incredibly well. So what happened to Oregon along that line? And there are some producers who have made Chardonnay in Oregon their entire history. Ponzi, Adelsheim, Sokol-Blosser, Eyrie. They've always made Chardonnay. They never stopped making it. But this groundswell of other producers is a pretty recent thing. And there were really two reasons why Chardonnay didn't get off the ground in quite the way that in Oregon, in quite the way one would think. And one that you've probably heard a lot about is plant material. And in 1974, when David Adelsheim was working at the Lycée in Beaune, he noticed that Chardonnay in France was arriving at the winery at the same time as Pinot Noir, or even earlier than Pinot. Well, that was not the case here in Oregon. The Chardonnays were coming in 2 and 3 weeks later, and they weren't exactly what we would call ripe. And I need to go to that word ripe for a moment because it is a very subjective word. Your ripe banana is my overripe banana. Your underripe avocado is my perfect avocado. And so ripeness is very subjective. And that's true for grape growing as well. And it's not sort of about how you taste the grape, but what you want your wine to taste like. So ripeness is an important factor. So what defined ripe in 1972 and 1978 and 1982? And, well, the thing that I love about that part of the conversation, the great irony and chuckle of it all, is that Kendall Jackson Vintner's Reserve is actually what set the standard for what New World Chardonnay tasted like. And Oregon can never make a wine like that, ever, 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 under any clonal material, climate change. Well, I shouldn't say that probably, but certainly to date, Oregon is incapable of making a Chardonnay that would taste like that. So whatever was being made here was not particularly well accepted in the marketplace. So we often talk about the Dijon clones and we think of them as new, but they were brought over here, Chardonnay and Pinot Noir, between 86 and 88, and were prepared for planting in the 1990 and beyond. So these vineyards are 25 years old. These are not necessarily new plantings. So plant material has changed, but the marketplace has changed a great deal in that the gatekeepers and consumers, we've got even third generation of wine drinkers in our country now. So there's been a lot of evolution in what people are looking for. They obviously haven't stopped loving Kendall Jackson because we continue to be the #1 seller. So new drinkers are coming into to tasting that wine and falling in love with it, just as the wine drinkers did in the early 80s. So that hasn't changed, but the evolution of wine drinkers has changed, and their palates have changed. And that's true for how we listen to music and how we eat food and how we dress and all sorts of other things as we mature in our tastes. So you've got those two things, and then let's just add to that one other thing, which is the quality of wines that are coming out of the Willamette Valley. And much of this is a tribute to the spirit of collaboration and cooperation that is, I don't know if it's unique to Oregon, but we certainly do it well. And we created a technical seminar that was started in 2015. And it was the outgrowth from what is now called the Chardonnay Celebration, which is more of a consumer event with a seminar and a tasting. This is a full day, very technical, winemakers only. And we get together with 85 barrel samples. We only know what AVA they're from. And to participate in this, you fill out a questionnaire that probably has 150 data points from how you prepared your vineyard to everything through winemaking. And we have now 5 years of the collection of those data points. So there's a lot of knowledge. But what comes out of this is a full day of conversation about what makes great Chardonnay in the Willamette Valley. And I think that because we're all experimenting together, I can only do so much work in my own cellar to learn. But when I have the cellar of 100 of my colleagues in Oregon to work with, you can learn a lot very, very quickly, and that's a lot of what we've done as well. So all of those things have created what we really consider the Willamette Valley Chardonnay of today. And with that, one of the reasons that we were jealous of the seminar last Friday when Nick and Thomas and Molly all got on there and showed off their stuff, their skills, tasting wine blind. It was an amazing exercise. And rather than just give you a dull PowerPoint today, which we're totally capable of doing, just in case you care, we decided that we were going to approach Chardonnay. If you don't know a lot about Chardonnay, you probably aren't working for Jackson Family. We are arguably one of the largest, if not the largest, most important producer of Chardonnay in the world. I really think that and believe that, and the work that we're doing across all of our wineries and in all of our regions. And you know a lot about Chardonnay. And we wanted to not just talk about Chardonnay in terms of what Oregon has to offer, but we wanted to put it in the context of Chardonnay from around the world, because in the end, you sell against Chardonnays from all over the world, not just from Oregon and other Oregon portfolios. So we've got 5 wines here today, and I'm going to throw it over to what are clearly the experts, Molly and Thomas, to kick us off in this tasting. TP, you want to start?
Yeah, I'll do the first one this time.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So color's not really a big deal. They're all kind of the same color, pale straw with a little bit of gold, since they're all Chardonnays. You know, on the nose on this particular wine, I get kind of a hazelnut thing. There's clearly some oak. I get a lot of citrus and red and green apple. I mean, that's pretty standard Chardonnay stuff. There's a little bit of mineral on this, though, that would give me reason to kind of think a little bit more about where it might be from. There's a little bit of kind of a hay component. The minerality's almost got a little bit of rock and stone to it. To me, it's inorganic, not organic, right? It's not leaves and mushrooms and forest flora. It's a little more rocky to me. Still vanilla and toast is there for sure, along with the fruit. And by the way, on slide 2 of the PowerPoint, there's a regional descriptor for each of the wines. I don't know if we mentioned that. So if you want to follow along and win fabulous prizes and see if you can deduce what we're talking about, it's on slide 2 of the PowerPoint to give you a little bit of an idea. So interesting on the palate, this wine turns a little tartar to me than I thought it was gonna from smelling it. You know, Molly tasted this wine in the first session, and she had a great descriptor, which I am totally getting too. It's got a little sweet tart candy thing, like the acid kind of really races through to the back of your mouth a little, as opposed to sort of unfolding in a slower fashion to me. And then the thing that really is telling for this wine is there's a little bit of a kind of grainy, crunchy texture. Like I think there's some skin contact on this wine, because I'm getting a little bit of kind of grape skin tannin. Yeah, and it's got a pretty long finish. It's delicious wine. It's really the texture to me is what would have me kind of pondering where it might be from, and that very sweet core fruit that turns tart super fast on the palate. Anybody, Molly or Eugenia, want to add anything to that?
This time around, I got a really distinct note of Fruit Loops cereal. Just struck me like, yeah. I know that aroma. Oh, that cereal my mom wouldn't let me eat. So of course I remember it. But yeah, that sweet tart, and there's just this underlying sense of minerality, like a really clean white rock minerality.
But, you know, to use, just really, really briefly, to use the word that Eugenia mentioned, that means so many different things, so many different people. There's some ripeness to this wine. I mean, it is not, you know, the fact that it tartaned up a little on the palate would have me going, wow, is it old world? I don't know. This would be a bit of a challenging wine to try to blind taste. I think that the little bit of kind of crunch on the texture would lead me to a certain area, but that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, it definitely has that Smarties candy, like almost candied fruit characteristic, but then this really tart acid, which is fun. But there's also some laziness in here that gives it a little toast, and I got a little sulfur off of mine this morning, which I don't now.
Awesome.
It's pretty.
So having tasted this, my wines have been sitting out here on the desk for this time, so I intentionally let them warm up. We should remind the audience we're not necessarily all tasting the same wine. We are tasting the same region. We did that intentionally. One of we've talked about in both sessions the kind of candied aspect of this wine, and how it does. The aromatics are quite ripe. There's a lot of the tropical fruit kind of ripeness that you would think you'd get in a warmer, slightly warmer climate. But the acid is really strange. And I'm almost thinking that acid was added to this wine.
Adjusted, right? Adjusted. Yeah, I feel
now
the same
it's
way.
warmed up and it's been sitting here and I'm tasting that acid again. I'm like, I think that they added that acid at the end. I don't think that's natural because I don't think you'd get that natural acid based on the ripeness that you're getting from the fruit, and the alcohol would be a bit of a key here. I was looking for that. But I do think they might have adjusted that acid at the end. Mine says 13.5. My wine is 13.5.
That's awesome.
Mine's the same as yours.
Yes, it happens that you and I have the same wine. Yeah. Sorry, guys. We did have a reveal earlier.
Should we take them to 2?
Yeah, let's
Yeah.
do 2.
Sure.
Yeah, 2 is more fun.
Yeah. Molly, you
That
wanted
should be a
to do?
hint. Should be a hint. I give all these hints without really meaning to. That's a bit of a hint.
Sure. So number 2 on the nose, immediately it's more pronounced, a little bit more pronounced than the first wine. With a lot of so lemon citrus, lemon curd, lemon pith. I even got a little grapefruit pith and apricot peel or apricot skin off of this one earlier. The wood is definitely there, but it's really, really nice. It's like really, really nice wood. Always reminds me of Bazooka Joe bubblegum for some weird reason, but this kind of confectioner sugar and vanilla. It's always really good French oak that reminds me of super cheap bubblegum, whatever that means. There's also this really chalky minerality to this wine, and a toasted nut kind of note to it as well, with this nice appley, almost baked apple kind of fruit. And on the palate, the acid here is like almost high. It's really, and that's all the way through the palate of this, from when it enters the mouth to when it leaves the mouth. It's zippy and fresh and makes your eyes kind of squint and the back of your jaw kind of go, and just gives you that little bit of salivation. And intense on the palate as well. It's got this really intensity, but this nice elegance. It's not kind of a 1-2 punch. While the palate is really pronounced, the palate is, I mean, the nose is more pronounced. The palate is really elegant and really seamless and really kind of creamy and round. There's definitely some lactic notes and leesy notes along with the wood, and a nice long finish. And I forgot to mention some honey and floral notes as well in this wine. It's pretty.
Yeah, it's really pretty. I think the one, I love that evaluation, Molly. That was perfect for me. What is almost always my tell on wine from this particular part of the world is you smell it and it tastes like it's, or smells like it's going to come on, like it's going to taste like gangbusters, right? Like dense and rich and concentrated. And on the palate, as you mentioned, and I could see, we saw it this morning when we all tasted this wine. I would actually go to high acid on this. I kind of called it medium plus today, or earlier. But man, it has all the rich components that you got on the nose, but they're so driven by acid and freshness and minerality on the palate, with the oak framing it up just beautifully. That's kind of the one thing I'd say about this wine.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting listening to us talk about acid, where I would say that the measurement of the acid on these first 2 wines is not particularly different. It's going to be minimal at best, but the way it presents itself in the mouth is so outrageously different. And
Precisely.
Part of it is, as you say, TP, this wine has all this. First, the aromatics are pretty aggressive, and what's lovely is the wine is more elegant and restrained than that. But the acid appears to be so in balance because of the mid texture of the wine. It doesn't feel like it's an elbow because it's connected to this greater texture that's both grape and wood through the middle of the mouth. So it's just a much more seamless presentation of a wine.
Agreed.
Yeah. While being a full-bodied, wine, it's still very elegant and got some little light on its feet.
Mm-hmm.
The Fat Ballerina.
It's all about balance. That's all about balance. That's the beauty of a balanced wine. You can have a lot of stuff, but it's in balance, and you don't consider it too much because of that.
Jump in and make some guesses, team. There's
Yeah, we're not these
fabulous
guys
prizes of Oregon Chardonnay are in the waiting wings for you if you can get them right.
I'll just send you guys some more if we don't have any takers. Molly, TP, you can
Oh, okay.
look out.
Perfect.
We'll answer you guys.
All right, wine number 3. Or should I take this one? I was
Yeah,
leaving.
please.
Okay.
That'd be that. I think that's awesome.
So this is leaving these wines open for these couple of hours has been a great exercise. This is really a textbook wine. It's beautifully made. There's a lot of aromatics. They are they're not quite tropical. There's a lot of lovely baked apple and peach, but ripe peach, not giving us sort of the stone concept, but the real ripeness of peach. Not dole peaches, but awfully close to dole peaches. You could almost open the can and you would be there. The Dole or Del Monte or whoever does the peaches. Quite a bit of acid, lots of texture, clearly a barrel fermented wine. There's a lot here. This is a wine that is giving you quite a bit, but it is pretty well balanced. And so you can sort of take all of that, but it would require some serious food. It's not a cocktail wine. Very, very rich, very full, extremely well made. And in fact, for the brand, it's actually a little bit more reticent than when the brand first started making wine 20 years ago, or quite a while ago.
Yeah, I love that. I think the one thing I'd add too is while all these wines demonstrate some lees aging and lees stirring, this one is creamier, to be sure, than the other two, right? There's more weight and more mouthfeel, and generally that would mean probably a little bit higher alcohol, which probably means it's from a warmer spot, would be my hypothesis. It's amazing how good I am at predicting wines when I have the bottle open right in front of me.
Yeah,
I never get it wrong. It's
yeah,
amazing.
I'm a darn good taster when I'm looking at the label.
I know.
Yeah.
It's a little softer, the acid too, in this one. It's not as marked as it was in the other two. I mean, it's balanced in mine, but and maybe it's just the benefit of it getting a little air and then over a few hours, but it's soft. The acid is softer. Doesn't have quite that same tart kick.
Well, and one thing for everybody on the call, myself included, and all of our esteemed wine professionals who are listening in today, it's miraculous to me, and we kind of lose track of it. And I'm sure Eugenia, Rachel, and Molly would agree. Man, are these different than they were at 8 in the morning? And maybe it's because I had a bite to eat, or maybe it's because, but the wines have opened up and are showing considerably more expansively than they were this morning. It's pretty cool when that happens. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I cheated and went ahead a wine, and it is that's what would have been my first comment, Thomas, was that, whoa, look what 2 hours of being open and being warmed up does for a wine.
Mm-hmm.
Just incredible.
Well, we have a few winners. Shall we reveal? Oh, Pete.
Ooh, all right.
Clutch. Okay.
Oh.
Molly, why don't you do the honors this time around?
Me?
Yeah.
So wine number 1, and do remember that we have different wines. So my wine number 1 is the De Wetshof Limestone Hill Chardonnay. This is from South Africa. Doesn't specifically say where, and I think they're based in Stellenbosch.
But they're Robertson.
Robertson, sorry. It's delicious, and this is unoaked.
Yeah, I actually needed to spend a little time on the internet with these guys, and they are clearly Chardonnay powerhouses. I happen to have
Yeah.
the same wine as Molly. And by the way, this is a $19. We didn't mention this earlier, but we do have prices on these wines. This is a $19 bottle.
Yeah.
And I spent a little bit more just because it was all I could get in the market. Hamilton Russell is the one I'm using from Hemelinard, a little bit further south than Robertson, but there's a similar thread in these wines for sure. Look at Repole. Way to go, Pete. Calling out Stellenbosch. And then 2 was fun and exciting to taste. And people threw a couple out there for 2. And we all had different.
Skelton got this one. Shout out to John.
Oh, nice. So I have a Fabien Coche. It's white Burgundy from the Côte du Beaune. I have a Bourgogne level, so sub-village, but Fabien Coche is smack dab in the middle of Meursault, and this is one of the more expensive Bourgogne Chardonnay titled wines ever. It's basically declassified Meursault, super typical and super delicious. And I think that the one tasting lesson for this wine for me just has always been my trigger. It smells like it's going to come on like gangbusters because there's so much aromatic complexity, and then it's really bright, crisp, fresh, and linear on the palate. So that's my 2 cents on that.
And can we make a note on price point on the Bergs versus where we're about to head in the Willamette Valley? I thought, Eugenia, that was a really interesting note you made last time.
So mine's $40 for just Bourgogne Chardonnay. Great producer, but.
I am Domaine Roland, and it's a Pernod Vergelès, and this is also just a Bourgogne, and it is $56 a bottle. Super delicious, loved every minute of it. I was forced into buying several other bottles from this producer, including a Premier Cru and Grand Cru. You don't go to the wine store when you're hungry. But anyway, yes, it's a perfectly lovely example of Burgundy, and there was a lot in the nose, and what I loved was that I didn't get overwhelmed in the mouth. The mouth was really elegant and beautifully framed. The wood component, super integrated, just a lovely wine. And all it did was just open up to be even a prettier wine over these last couple of hours.
And I went with a little higher end bottling from a Negauche producer. So this is Olivier Leflèvre Saint-Aubin Premier Cru, the Les Champlots. And this was about $59. So, yeah, they also had a Pernod Vergelès for about $56. And then in order to get something in around the $40 range, which is kind of where we were looking, it was Bourgogne Blanc, which is just an interesting thing to note when we have single vineyard Chardonnays coming out of Oregon that are the same price as a Bourgogne Blanc and just a village level wine.
I think we really blew our tasting room D2C teams away here in Oregon. We did a year ago or so a Burgundy tasting, both red and white, and they could not believe that the white, and we were doing Premier Crus essentially, they couldn't believe that those wines were 2 to 3 times more expensive than our Oregon wines, single vineyard wines, because they did not deliver more. And I think it really helped them go into the tasting room when people say, whoa, $45 or $42, you people are charging an arm and a leg. And it's like, actually, this is a steal.
It's very true.
Absolutely. Yep. And so number 3, you've probably guessed it, process of elimination, but we've headed home for many of you to the North Coast, California.
So I have the pay, Sonoma Coast, 2018. Oh, Thomas, you're on mute.
Sorry, the dog was barking. I have Hartford Court 2018 Russian River Valley. What's up, Stewie? See you're on the call.
What was the wine that was on the Spectator 100?
I believe this is number 44, if you're scoring at home.
Yay! Baby. Hartford Court team, A+, A+. And I have the flowers. And this was really, really lovely because this is a lot more enjoyable wine than when they were first getting started, a much more restrained and better integrated style. So I have the flowers, and it is $38 for the flowers.
I think this one was about $49 for the pay.
Yeah.
So a fun trip around the world, as Eugenia said. I think it's just great to put it in context, and especially around places where we have that more fluency around these regional characteristics as we enter home into the Willamette Valley. So I think it would be great to start off with a quick primer on, why is this we know it's a great place for Pinot Noir, but why is this such a great place to grow and make Chardonnay?
Well, obviously, it starts with soil and climate. And yes, Jeff Stewart made a comment here. Don't forget Maggie Hawk Jolie and the La Crema, Willamette Valley Pinot, also on the top 100, and then Mount Brave. So 4 of our winemakers all made it to the top 100, and Sarah and Sam, who haven't spent a lot of time on the top 100, obviously Stewie and Carp land there pretty routinely, but congratulations to the ladies. I thought that was super. And particularly to get a Willamette Valley Pinot, very exciting. It's soil and climate, of course. We all know that those are the primary factors that are the raw material and the basis for any wine, any variety made anywhere in the world. We have the 3 soil types here, but the loess soil that's in Chehalem Mountains is not one that we at JFW have fruit. We don't have fruit coming from there, particularly Chardonnay. There's a teeny tiny bit of Pinot that's Siduri from there. But so we don't really work with the loess soils particularly. We work with the sedimentary and the volcanic soils. And as I said, when I talked about the symposium that we do and the collection of all these data points, 5 years ago, I was really trying to wrap my head around the 2 soil types and how they express themselves in the wine. And we're all very clear about that answer with Pinot Noir. We know how to describe them. That we have a full vocabulary. And most people, when they're introduced to a wine region, they have, in this case, a Willamette Valley wine, which clearly can have both soil types. And so you don't really learn that specific piece. You learn more of the climate piece than the soil piece. But as you get into single vineyard wines, obviously, you're going to start learning the soils. And one of the primary differences that took me a little while to get my head around was the textural part. And there is a sort of Shane likes to call it, licking your tongue on gravel or something. And in a way that Shane actually can make it sound beautiful. I make it sound disgusting. But there is a sort of a gravelly feel in the middle of the palate. And it was really Maggie Harrison from Antica Terra that first said that out loud. Volcanic soils are kind of very cool. And she, being one of the coolest winemakers, was dead set on using sedimentary soils, and that seemed contradictory. But she talked about the tannin, and it's that tannin that gives you this mouthfeel without having to get it through alcohol or through oak or any extra ripe fruit that ends up being more tutti frutti. You don't need those things to get the kind of textural components that you want in the wine. It comes right out of the dirt, and it really manifests itself in these sedimentary soils. And both the Willackenzie and the Grand Moraine are on sedimentary soils. And then there's the climate, of course. And the reason that we only grow Pinot Noir in the Willamette Valley is because it's the only red that will ripen successfully. We are at the northern edge of the ability to ripen red grape varieties. So there is no Grenache, Mourvedre, and Syrah, and all of those, not because people don't like them, it's because we can't get them ripe enough to make wine. So it's Pinot. But when you get to white wine, we can probably grow any white wine up here and make something quite special. But it allows us to make the accumulation of sugar is much slower, so we're allowed to get some mature flavors at lower bricks. And we tend to pick between 19 and 22, or 20 and 22 bricks, which most Californians would consider really on the underripe side. And it's because of the sunshine and the accumulation of sugars during that ripening period. So we get less alcohol. We get the fruit components. There's not you don't, when you talk about Oregon Chardonnays, you don't really talk about fruity. Fruity is not, it's not what you're talking about. You're talking about all sorts of secondary types of flavors and aromatics that are not just fruit driven, which is really great. We do get another one of Shane's great descriptors, and Shane is the best at description. I don't know where this vocabulary comes from, but it's just marvelous stuff. But white clover was an aroma and flavor that he picked up years ago in our Grand Moraine wines, and I think white clover is a perfect descriptor. It's a little bit of the sweetness that you would get from the clover, but it still has sort of the green part of it, but not like a stewed bean kind of green, but in the fresh spring kind of green. So those are sort of the soil climate things. Pedro asked a question earlier about our shifting climate, and is it more consistent so we can get more ripeness? I think the shift is that 20 years ago, we would have said we get 3 ripe vintages out of 10 and 7. Now it's the other way around. We get 7 ripe vintages out of 10 and 3 that are more challenging. I think that would be the best way to talk about what climate change has done for us in Oregon.
Do you guys want to hit on the, thank you, Eugenia. Do you guys want to hit on the Grand Moraine Yamhill Carlton chart? That's one of our domestically distributed wines. I know you guys have that in front of you, and you I just talked to Shane. I hung up right before this call. He says hi and thank you to everyone for all you're doing. And I think he's glad we're talking about his wine today. So want to taste through that one?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start. I think that, you know, that and I love tasting wine with winemakers because I learn a lot. It's great tasting with fellow masters of wine, fellow master sommeliers, but white clover is like the most brilliant descriptor for the floral that I'm getting on this wine. And you know, I know that not everyone's got a white clover plant sitting outside their house, but it's just super evocative and really, really describes one of the principal aromatic components of this wine. I think that there's also, you know, and we've seen as these wines have warmed up and been open for a minute. I mean, this one's it was all really green apple and lemony at the beginning of our tasting this morning. Now there's some of that tropical component. It's muted. It doesn't taste like a ripe pineapple, but there's the beginning of this wine starting to put on a little bit of weight and texture and definite added layers of fruit, but still with that incredibly racy, lean, focused finish. It's really showing beautifully.
And it's got that little bit of that tannin acid grip in the mid palate that I got on the Burgundy as well, which is really nice. That kind of thread of this chalky acid running through it.
Yeah, that's really appreciated. It's trying to build volume into a wine without, again, using alcohol or oak to get there.
Yeah.
And trying to pull that out of the raw material. And you're so right, Thomas. The wine being open for these couple hours, there's this fleshiness that's coming. I really get a lot of peach and sort of apricot flower. It's really it's developing a lot of fruit components that we will see as this wine ages. I don't know anybody who can, you know, I always bring home 6 bottles and put them in my cellar, and I don't have any older Chardonnays from Grand Moraine. They just get consumed. I don't know how it happens, but they just get consumed. But this is an example of where these Oregon wines, this is true for Pinot Noir as well, where we are very similar to our colleagues in Burgundy, is that the wines age for exceptionally long periods of time. And I think not too long ago, we had a 2007 Adelsheim Chardonnay from the Stoller Vineyard. And it was just a mind blower. It was just absolutely a mind blower. And certainly the fruit flavors had moved more towards some of that honeysuckle and things like that, but that acid backbone was still right there. And it just makes the wine finish so balanced and clean on your palate.
You know, I think you opened up, now that you mentioned that, Eugenia. You opened up in '07, just the straight Willamette Adelsheim once when I was up there, and it was beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Under screw cap, I think, too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's seamless. And this wine, too, another thing is there, you know that there's oak there because you get this sensation of it, but it is so seamlessly knit into this wine that it's not like, oh, oak, of course.
Right. Right. And on this wine, we use puncheons, not the regular barrels. We make so little wine that we literally buy one new puncheon a year. We probably have the most conservative barrel program in the company, but it's one new puncheon a year, and that's about all we need. That's usually somewhere between 10 and 12% of new wood in the final blend.
So I think that the other wine you guys have in your glasses, the Willackenzie Estate Willamette Valley Chard, for me is a beautiful, this side by side is really this beautiful juxtaposition because you have that wonderful through thread of that backbone of acidity that we were just talking about, carries through the years. But Eric Kramer, who, has a brilliant reputation with working with Chardonnay in the Willamette Valley and is doing amazing things at Willackenzie in recent vintages, but he really takes it somewhere different than Shane does. And so you have that regional typicity that, as Eric would say, but really some different stylistic and viticulture choices. So bring that one to life for us too, if you would.
I'll just really briefly, and Eugenia described this wine beautifully today. It's definitely a little richer and more expansive, right? It shows a little more ripeness, and I'll let Eugenia talk about obviously why that is, but at the same time, it still has that Oregon kind of tension and balance and crispness and freshness that I just is one of the things I love about Chardonnay from Oregon, and specifically the ones that we're producing among some other notable producers down there. This wine has more. It's a little bit bigger to me. Not good, not bad, not indifferent. That's just how that's how it's hitting me. What do you guys think?
It is bigger. It's silky and it's round, but I was just noticing too that acidity is still just zingy. Really zingy in this wine. So even while you've got this more sort of pillowy softness and this kind of peach and stone fruit things going on, this acid was kind of like dancing on my tongue. Which was kind of nice.
So it's interesting to talk about this. Grand Moraine is made from the single vineyard Grand Moraine sedimentary soils. But Eric has a little bit more opportunity to work with multiple vineyards on the Willamette Valley bottling. And obviously we were showing these two wines today because they're the ones that you work with every day in the marketplace. And Eric does pick a little bit riper. It's kind of funny. We use the way our winemakers pick as a reference. So we were working on picking, Thomas, had the Hamilton Russell.
Yes.
And we are making some wines for Hamilton Russell here in Oregon. We've made a Pinot Noir for a couple of years, and we started making Chardonnay this last year. So we're trying to figure out when to, and Emil can't come over because of COVID. So we're trying, and it's his first Chardonnay. So we're trying to figure out how we're supposed to help him pick these grapes. And so it's a very funny conversation. So are we going to pick on Shane's level? No, we're not going to pick at Shane's level, but we're not going to quite pick where Lynn picks. Oh, are we going to pick where Eric picks? No, we'll pick like 2 days before Eric, but like 1 day after Lynn, and it was just the funniest conversation because it was all done in these reference points to these particular styles. But Eric does pick a little bit later. He is intentionally looking for a wine that is a little bit richer and a little bit rounder. But you can see, and part of that great acid that you're getting is from Zena Crown, because he gets to put a little bit of Zena Crown into that wine. And Maple Grove, which is a new vineyard for most of you because we don't have a single vineyard Maple Grove or a brand called Maple Grove. Gorgeous, gorgeous vineyard. It's a 600-acre parcel, but we planted 100 acres in 2014, 30% Chardonnay, 70% Pinot. And it's mostly marine sedimentary, but there is a basaltic uplift. And so there are some peaks in there that have some basaltic outcropping. And you tend to get a little, and the climate is a teeny tiny bit warmer than Xena Crown. So if you use growing degree days, and Xena Crown is about 2000, 1900, 2000, and Grand Moraine, our warmest site, is about 2400. Maple Grove is about 2100. So little warmer than Xena, but not as warm as Grand Moraine. But it tends to have the Chardonnays tend to get a little riper, maybe that they're young vines. But we almost moved to tropical fruit. We definitely get a lot of white peach and other stone fruits and orchard fruits out of that vineyard. And it will be, it's a gorgeous vineyard, and it will become a big part of the program. But between the two different vineyards, the heat summation and the style that the winemaker is trying to create, you get two very, very different wines, but you still get that same balance of the seamlessness, the kinds of fruit components, and that racy acid. It's just there. That's the one thing that we get. Mother Nature gives us in abundance, which is great.
Speaking of tropical, we cannot neglect our Siduri new member of the domestically distributed Willamette Valley Chardonnay family. So I know TP and Molly, you guys got a chance to taste that. Eugenia, of course, you're familiar, but do you want to touch on that briefly? Because that's a new one for the team.
You go first, Molly. I've been talking.
Okay. Sure. So, gosh, to me, if I had to describe that one compared to these two, I might actually say fruity, Eugenia. That wine actually kind of surprised me with the fruit that was more abundant on the nose of that wine, but then it also was lean and just had that beautiful, again, that elegant acidity and that fresh light texture on the palate. It wasn't sweet in any way, and I wouldn't say that the palate was overtly fruity, but just that first whiff on the nose. But I think pretty was really the word and delicious was the words I came away from that with. It was like biting into a fresh apple. It was so good.
Yeah, I agree, Molly. I tasted this wine. I just wasn't sure how it was going to express itself, right? But I think that it amazingly lines up with kind of the expression of the Siduri Willamette Valley Pinot Noir in terms of it's a little bit riper than some of the stuff we're doing. It's a little more fruit driven, but it's not simple and it's not overdone. I thought, I agree. This wine, I think we're going to do really well with this wine. I thought it was, I wrote some tasting notes, and sometimes I just get tired of evaluating wine and I'm trying to find out all that. This is just, it's delicious. I drank it very rapidly while tasting it. That came out weird, but you guys know what I mean. It's a little softer.
Easy to drink.
Yeah, a little softer texturally, but boy, to Eugenia's point, that acid backbone is still there, man. It still carries it. It's really, really yummy wine. I'm excited to start working with it. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, it's about 20% stainless steel, which I think really, really helps keep that nice, lean, clean, and acid, driven backbone of that wine. But it also has a little bit more oak in it. There was not a lot of lees stirring. Again, we're looking, for something that's a little bit more razor sharp. And if Matt were here, I think he would tell you that part of his goal, and Thomas, you hit on it perfectly, was coming up with the right companion for the Pinot. And the Pinots are delicious. They're they're aromatically, they're very forward. You get a big noseful when you open a Siduri Pinot Noir, and that's what we love about it. And you can tell. Are you down in Santa Rita? Are you up in Oregon? Are you in Russian River? You can tell when you smell those wines. And so this is the same thing where it is more fruit driven. Again, he picks a little bit, that was a little bit riper picking. We did the same thing when we sat down with Matt. Poor Matt, as we sat around him and talked about when he was picking while he was there in the room. So it was very funny. But we also need to remember that it's a 19, and 19 was a year when we had the challenges of rain. And so you get you tend to get a wine that will come in and be a little bit leaner and sleeker. So when you take all of these components together, there's Maple Grove, Grand Moraine. I think there might be a little Jory Hills in there, and I'm missing something. It'll come to me in a minute. But you've got these components that you get to blend for what it is you're trying to achieve, which is easier sometimes than trying to get everything you want out of a single plot. And it's blended to have that delicious factor in there. And it is, to your point, it's under screw cap, and you chill that thing down. I talked about some wine earlier. It's not a quaffer. That wine is a quaffer.
Agreed.
Yeah, you don't need food with that wine.
Yeah.
You can have food with that wine, but you don't need food with that wine. It's delicious.
Are there any
dinner
questions?
wine.
Perfect what, Mom?
That was the perfect wine for dinner wine.
Yeah, which
Or
I think a lot of us
Or for
are
breakfast.
participating in.
breakfast.
Yeah, or for Monday morning breakfast if you're out.
So
Are there any questions out there? Oh, Thomas, go ahead.
I have a question for Eugenia. We didn't because she hit me with the exciting news on the first call that we have Chardonnay planted in our Jory Hills property. When, my Eugenia, will we see a single vineyard version of Jory Hills Chardonnay, and whom will produce it, if you are at liberty to divulge?
So 19 was the first year that we brought in any fruit off of Jory Hills, so it's still very, very young.
Right.
It's not its own brand at this point in time, so everybody's getting a little of it, so they can experiment around. Because we're not sure what that's going to be. We know it's Dundee Hills. Lynn and Kate are super excited about working with that fruit. And Eric's got a little coming in for his Willamette. So, and certainly Matt Revlett gets to work with it. So
Awesome.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to who's going to get to be the first single vineyard Jory Hills.
All right.
Yeah,
Thought I'd ask.
time will tell.
Yeah, I love it.
I knew Matt Farber would chime in the chat box.
Well, I didn't respond because I thought Matt might have done a message just to me.
Hey,
Like,
I'm not trying to get anybody in trouble.
Yeah.
It was just a question.
Yeah. Well, the fortunate thing is I'm not hiding anything. It's not like, that one of our winemakers has it in barrel, and it's just a matter of time before we bottle it and spring it on you.
Okay.
Yeah, the Jory Hills is pretty much new. There was just a little bit planted when we bought it, so we're just starting to get to know that vineyard. I think Eric, though, Eric's done a lot of work with Dundee Hills fruit, of course. And Jeff, I'm just not sending you down that much.
Stewie.
I'm sorry, maybe 50,000. That's as far as you're going to get. So Jeff has a Zena Crown Chardonnay in his cellar from Vintage 20. That's a little ha-ha, I can tell you.
Yeah.
Nice.
And now that all the juicy details are coming out, I hate to wrap this thing up, but
Yeah, I know.
someone's going to get in trouble. So
It's the 12:01 hour.
So we closed out with this last time, but I loved the words you guys picked. I had the lofty task for these guys of placing 2 words to describe Oregon Chardonnay to leave us with, and I think they did a brilliant job. So let's see if they can remember after tasting through a second round.
I think
Fresh.
bright and balanced.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, we definitely
Go ahead,
had
Molly.
fresh
Go ahead.
there.
I should go last this time. I went first.
It's
last
okay. I think bright and balanced. I don't know if those are the same words I used last time.
Well, they're good ones regardless.
I said fresh and elegant, and but I remember Eugenia's, but I'm going to let her say it because hers
I
is.
can't remember it. I can't remember it.
Delicious tension, Eugenia.
Yeah, delicious.
Delicious
Oh.
tension.
I was going to use sleek and sophisticated.
Oh,
Yeah, that
I like
happened
that
to me
too.
that
Some
happened to me
bonus words
on
here.
another one of these, and they said, "You asked such a great question. Will you ask it again?" And I'm like, "No, can't.
No.
Sorry, that was 3 hours ago. Cannot remember."
So we thank you guys so much, and we have a lot of exciting stuff in the pipeline here. Coming in January, we will be unveiling all kinds of resources and tools with this big Oregon Chardonnay illumination campaign that we're launching. So we plan to shine a spotlight and bring to light these beautiful, bright, balanced, elegant, sophisticated, delicious, seamless wines for all of you. So here's a little sneak peek at some of the exciting stuff you can see to come. And thank you, Eugenia and TP and Molly, so much. This was really fun. Wish we had a third round coming up.
So if everybody goes out and does all the work that we're hoping you will do, which is sell our Oregon Chardonnays, you too can become Illuminati.
There you go.
Exactly. Oregon Chardonnay Illuminati.
I'm hoping we get Illuminati rings.
Yeah, there's some swag in the works. So thank you guys for your time, and see you later.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
If we don't have a